Zimbabwe is loosening regulations on the official exchange rate of the national currency, enabling it to align with an interbank rate that firms are allowed to use for commerce. According to data released on the nation's Reserve Bank's website on Thursday, the currency now officially trades at 290.88 Zimbabwean dollars per US dollar, up from 108.66 Zimbabwean dollar against the greenback at the start of the year. 296.68 Zimbabwean dollar is the current interbank rate. The government has tried a variety of methods to try to stem the depreciation of the local currency, including a 10-day moratorium on bank lending. Inflation has risen to 132% in May, the first time it has risen above 100% in 10 months, thanks to the depreciation. Now, President Emmerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe expects that the rates will eventually converge over time with the look of things. So today we are discussing Zimbabwe's easing of currency controls, and this is Business Edge. I am Lekan Onabanjo, standing in for Tolu Lokbe at the Balogun. You're welcome. Joining me from Harare, Zimbabwe, is Denford Mutashu. He's the president, Confederation of Zimbabwean Retailers. Good morning to you, Mr. Denford. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Very good morning. Thank you for having me on the program.
So quickly, can you just explain to us what this latest decision by the Zimbabwean government is as regards the dollar and the current exchange rates?
I think following the suspension of lending that happened for about 10 days, there was also, a number of measures that government has come through in order to stabilize the inflationary environment towards pricing stability on the general market. Remember, there has been a continued war against the parallel market exchange rate as well as imported inflation, owing to the Russia-Ukraine war. So there are a number of domestic measures that government is coming through in order to show up aggregate demand as well as ensure that the inflationary pressures can die down. And the easing of the currency controls is actually revolved around ensuring that the auction market exchange rate moves in tandem with market developments and also the market demand for foreign currency on the auction system, and the realization also that there has got to be the interbank exchange rate that business must apply in pricing is emanating from the outcry by business, which has been complaining that usage of rather application of the auction system exchange rate has been letting them down in terms of attracting US dollar sales, especially for majority of formal businesses. So the near convergence is something that is quite welcome because it would now lead to more customers coming through formal stores to purchase using the US dollars.
Now, having a currency exchange policy that is market-driven is usually encouraged by developmental partners, but then that is not so when you talk about a reserve and, of course, a central bank. So tell us, what are the factors that actually aid these two variables against one another?
What has led to this is the impact of the parallel market exchange rate on general economy. Remember, there has been a lot of fight against the parallel market exchange rate, which has been affecting pricing in the general economy. It has also been affecting, eroding real disposable incomes for the majority of the working class. So a lot of businesses have been tracking the parallel market exchange rate, and in doing so, it meant that there has been a lot of pressure on inflation, which by May end is actually expected to be sitting around more than 135. Currently, it's at 132%. So currently what we have seen is the realization that the floating exchange rate may actually lead to better pricing for sustainability and for survival by the majority of local businesses. Remember, initially before this, there has been a directive by His Excellency the President for business to price using the interbank exchange rate. But the interbank exchange rate, as well as the the formal market, the official market, the auction market exchange rate, have not been moving at the pace at which the market has been expecting, or rather at the rate at which the parallel market exchange rate has been moving. So to try and tame the marauding parallel market exchange rate, government has seen it fit to also loosen up a bit, ease up a bit, ensure that those two exchange rates can float and can actually move with supply and demand. And even on the auction, the government is also committed that business will only bid for foreign currency that will be available on the auction system, as opposed to the previous scenario where bids would actually come through, be successful, but were not met or settled in more than about 4 months. So I think that has actually been causing a lot of anxiety and outcry and price escalation as businesses continue to track the parallel market exchange rate. So it is a way of trying to tame the parallel market exchange rate, which is impacting negatively on the general well-being of the economy.
Well, drawing from what you've said, Denford, and of course, I'm looking at the feelers that we've had. There is no doubt that the administration of President Emmerson Mnangagwa has done a lot in battling the issue of the value of the currency, shoring it up, and ensuring that it stabilizes over time on the international market. But tell us, looking at the solutions that they've proffered over time, which ones would you say have been mostly impactful?
I think one of the solutions that we have seen is for government to try and allow the US dollar to trade alongside the local currency. That actually has been one of the key decisions. I think you may also realize that currently the greater part of the informal sector is dollarized, while the formal market and the formal economy is continued with the de-dollarization journey, which government has sought to undertake. Because we also realize that if we were going to dollarize or re-dollarize, there is a big challenge, because most people will lose in terms of savings, just like what has happened in the past. Currently, there has been a commission which was headed by Justice Smith, which is actually allowed, or rather, recommended government to pay about 5 billion in savings that most people lost at the time that we dollarized. So if we were to come back to dollarization, I think those are some of the issues. The government does not have sufficient US dollars to cover the cost of re-dollarization, and hence the requirement to continue on the de-dollarization journey. A gradual de-dollarization will actually ensure that there is policy consistency. And in policy consistency, it is very imperative that it will allow proper business planning and also allow a comfort, a lending comfort for businesses, rather than a knee-jerk reaction where we can overnight dollarize. So I think we have seen quite a number of measures. Interest rates have also been pushed up, currently slightly above 80%. But I think the challenge there has been that the interest rates have yet been overtaken by inflation. So you also saw that as an arbitrage opportunity by many businesses who would borrow to finance illegal activities on the parallel market and repay banks. So it was a case of using money from the bank that is procured through loans to facilitate the parallel market exchange rate, exchange rate activities. So I think government has come through to plug those loopholes, and it has also banned third-party payments. It has also come through to ensure that companies that bid actually realistic bids and genuine bids that are supported by economic activities or productive activities. So you have seen also, even after the relaxation of the exchange rate, we have seen actually there's actually less and less companies that have, whose bids have been successful, because a lot of companies have been going on the market and actually, bid at much lower, rates. So right now they were actually caught off guard. And that is something that we want, because we want quality bids on the market backed by productivity.
Okay, now talking about the weekly auction at Denford. Now, do you think there would be any, or would there be any changes looking at the mode of sales of the foreign currency, or you think status quo would remain?
Sorry, come again?
Okay, so I'm talking about the weekly auction now. Now, looking at the weekly auction, I'm asking if there'll be any change when you talk about the sales of foreign currency, the forex, as it were, or you think that the status quo would remain. The mode of sales now,
I think
the foreign currency.
auction system will remain. It is for the best interest of the country, especially given the geopolitical escalations that has disrupted a lot of supply chains, as well as imported inflation. I remember we import quite a lot of wheat as well as crude oil. And that has actually destabilized local production and local supply of goods and services. So in order for us to continue with consistent supply or sourcing of foreign currency, which is on a market that is predictable, the auction system must continue, because it has been, that actually has been touted to have resulted in capacity utilization having jumped from merely 34% to the current 60%. And again, you have seen that despite the escalations of prices that have taken place owing to low real disposable incomes, I think largely we can attribute to the growth of the general economy, which has also spurred growth for income, rather for foreign currency, to the auction system. Before the auction system, I think you may also agree with me that the situation was very unpredictable, and a lot of companies were actually sourcing foreign currency from the parallel market. So we actually sat down with government and agreed to formulate an auction system. Of course, now the issue is to try and strengthen it, work on removing arbitrage opportunities, and ensuring that only proper and properly registered companies and those that are channeling funds towards productivity can participate on the auction. So I think now it is the time that we need to strengthen the supply of foreign currency onto the auction. And one way of doing so is to ensure that we also incentivize exporters so that they can continue to do more exports and supply the auction system.
Of course, if you can incentivize it, definitely so many people will be willing to buy in. That will be a pull-in for them. So let's quickly go on a break, Denford. I'll be back with you in a while. We'll continue the conversation after a short while. Now, the Zimbabwean government have for years battled with shoring up the value of the currency, of the country's currency, and one of the latest is the easing of regulations for its use. That's what we've been discussing. That was after the weekly auction run by the central bank was constantly criticized by business owners for being too tightly controlled. So this particular time we get to run off on a break, and when we return, we'll find out if improving on exports can actually help the Zimbabwean dollar accrue more value. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. Zimbabwe eases currency controls. What effect will that have on the country's legal tender and value? Well, Denford Mutashu, President, Confederation of Zimbabwean Retailers, has been our guest, and we continue to unpack the issue on the show. Now, let me get back to you, Denford. A general theory is that the more a country exports, the more the value of the currency will improve. So tell me, if Zimbabwe decides to improve on the goods and services being exported at this particular time, what effect would it have on the international benchmarks? Would it improve that, or it would just be what it is?
I think you will agree with me that there is need to improve the quality of the exports through value addition and beneficiation. The international firming of commodity prices has also largely been responsible to an increase in exports, total exports. If you compare with the same period of 4 months with last year, I think exports have increased by 16%. So I think that is something that is quite welcome for Zimbabwe because that has largely been responsible for the supply of foreign currency onto the auction system. And what basically has happened is that most companies have actually taken up the external markets by storm, owing to the introduction of our own currency that has improved competitiveness. We previously, during the dollarization era, it was very difficult for us to export because the US dollar environment by its very own nature is quite expensive. It actually raises the cost of doing business in your jurisdiction. And when you have to compete with countries that are using their own currencies, it has been actually quite an uphill task for Zimbabwean companies. So since the introduction of our Zimbabwean dollar, we have seen that the measure has actually spurred, exports. And when you are looking at exports, currently we are focused on gold. Gold has largely been a major product that the country has been relying on in terms of exports. So it has actually, been followed by other minerals like platinum. Platinum we exported to the tune of, I think, 380 million Zimbabwean dollars. But if you look at gold, I think we exported more than 1.4 billion in the first quarter. And if you also look at tourism has also done so well in terms of foreign currency receipts. So generally, what we require as a country in order to stabilize our local currency and stabilize the general economy, we need to promote exports. Last year, we earned around 9.7 billion US dollars in total exports and foreign currency earnings. And this year, judging by how far we have moved in the first quarter, I think we can actually reach in the region of about 10 billion. And that 10 billion will actually then lead us to have more funds towards supporting the local reserves. So far, the Reserve Bank is sitting on about $1 billion US dollars in reserves. And we can also add that to the 1.7 billion that banks are sitting on, which is money for the private sector and various companies and individuals. So I think so far the country has been going in the right direction, save for the challenges here and there, like the price escalations, inflationary pressures. Of course, we anticipated that inflation was going to go up, just like it has happened even in other big economies. I'm coming from Chicago. I was in Chicago, and I actually realized that the citizens are also crying a lot about the rise in global, the rise in food prices, also in food inflation. Generally it is emanating from the Russia-Ukraine war that has limited constrained supply or movement of goods and services out of those markets. So domestic measures are required. We also need to raise production because the country's currency is also as strong as its production capacity. We need to reduce our over-dependence on imports, especially those goods that we can be able to manufacture. Let's import substitute. Let's also ensure that the local products are accessible and affordable by the majority, because one of the concerns by the general public here is that the locally manufactured commodities have been more expensive than the imports. So I think that is one area now that we need to continue to work on.
Now, talking about inflation, now food prices were said to have increased more than 150%, according to reports that we heard a year earlier. That was due to the disruptions in the supply of commodities and, of course, staples that, of course, Zimbabwe usually consume. And, of course, that was actually affected by the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So people are actually wondering if Zimbabwe decides or agrees to buy maize from Uganda and Malawi, don't you think these new rules that are coming up now would whittle down the number of amount of maize that Zimbabwe can actually buy, whittling down of the buying power?
What has happened is that last year, remember, Zimbabwe had a very good agricultural season. We actually harvested more than any other time in our history for more than 10 or 20 years. And that was buoyed by the Pumbuza program and the Command Agriculture program. And we've also seen a lot of, road infrastructure, development that is taking place. But coming back to agriculture, what we are seeing is that this year we may have a drought, as has been shown by the local scenarios. We have seen that rains have not been quite consistent, and already we are seeing that we may require to import more maize. And so far, recently, I think government through the Grain Millers Association has also announced that we're probably going to import about 400 metric tons from Zambia and Malawi after some negotiations that have been taking place over a period of last few weeks. So that is beside what the government is holding in its reserves. So what we are doing is to forward plan and ensure that despite the impending drought, we can still ensure that people of Zimbabwe will not go hungry. And through a lot of other interventions like the presidential scheme, we are now already planning to ensure that the rapid infrastructure development that has taken place in terms of construction and dams across the country would now come through to assist the locals, the community people in irrigation schemes. Hence, the mechanization and advancement program that the Ministry of Agriculture currently is actually taking up. Okay. The drilling of wells across communities. So basically, what we see is that sometimes the climatic conditions may actually affect the planning, but we need to do more in order to ensure that the negative ramifications of climate change does not affect the people.
Okay, thank you so much, Denford. You've been really profound in your expositions on the show this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you. Have a very good day.
And you too. Now, at times one has to be daring when it comes to taking decisions, but these decisions must be apt and rational. Maybe or maybe not, the exchange rate of the Zimbabwean dollar would improve and stabilize. Time will definitely tell, but then the easing of controls is a step needed and might drive down the inflation rate as the time goes by. Let's quickly run off on a break right now. When we return, it'll be time for NC4 to watch. On NC4 to watch, let's quickly take you through the top 4 trending stories in the business world. We start with South African rands. Now, the South African rand firmed early on Friday as the US dollar sank to a one-month low amid signs the Federal Reserve might slow or even pause its monetary policy tightening in the second half of the year. At 06:34 GMT, the rand traded at 15.68 rands against the dollar, 0.16% stronger than its previous close. Away from that, Kenya's demand for electricity has hit a new peak demand of 2,051 megawatts, up from 2,036 megawatts recorded in November 2021, pointing to accelerated growth and recovery in demand, which slowed down in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll take you straight to Egypt. Egypt has received a $3 billion increase in funding from the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation to deal with soaring wheat prices caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And finally, crude oil prices dipped on Friday but stayed near a 2-month high, with Brent crude on track for its biggest weekly jump in 1.5 months, supported by the prospect of an EU ban on Russian oil and the upcoming US summer driving season. Now, Brent crude futures for July were down 21 cents or 0.2% at $117.19 a barrel at 0642 GMT, after rising as high as $118.17 earlier in the session. The benchmark was still on track for a gain of about 4% this week. And that's it on Business Edge for today. Do not forget that you can download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. Visit our website, www.newscentral.africa. And of course, you can also visit our social media platforms at New Central TV. My name is Lekan Onabanjo. Have a beautiful and a lovely weekend.